Okay, hi, I'm Teresa. I'm a baker at Dr. J's Bakery. It's that time of year again when everybody gets together for food and fun and celebrating the holidays. One of the things that everybody likes to do is eat cookies. Everybody loves cookies and everybody's got a favorite. There are many different types of cookies, and we have many at Dr. J's Bakery. Do you know how the cookie came to be?
No.
Most people don't. So let me tell you how the cookie got started. In America, a cookie is described as a thin, small, usually sweet cake. By definition, a cookie can be any variety of a handheld, flour-based sweet cake, either crisp or soft. Each country has its own name for cookies. What we know as cookies are called biscuits in England. Germans call them cakes, and in Italy they're called amaretti or biscotti. According to historians, the first record of cookies was their use as a test cake. Bakers would put a small amount of batter on a baking sheet and stick it in the oven to test the temperature. And the rest, as the saying goes, is history. After you learn about the different types of cookies that we offer, we hope that you'll stop by and have some. And Leanna's going to get us started on the cookies that we have.
So to start off with is shortbread. Shortbread was traced all the way back to the 12th century. It originates in Scotland and the British Isles, and as well as all throughout England. They called it the biscuit bread, which was basically they used it as biscuits and then they left it overnight. It was sometimes sweetened. The recipe calls for 1 part sugar, 2 parts butter, and 3 parts flour. They changed the recipe a little while after. They started substituting leavening for butter. They mostly use it for celebrations or special occasions, and there are 3 different types that we know of. There's the browns, the fingers, and the biscuits. And now I'm going to introduce to you one of my favorite cookies, the gingerbread man.
Of course you all know the gingerbread man is a timeless cookie. It is normally made on certain events like holidays such as Christmas or any other one. Now, did you know that gingerbread men are actually made from gingerbread, which is actually made from ginger? Mind's blown, right? Well, in fact, gingerbread was introduced to Europe in the year 992 by an Armenian monk named Gregory of Neapolis. He introduced it to Europe, and it was widely accepted as a tasty treat, all the way up to the 16th century, when Elizabeth I of England actually decided to make it into figures to impress all of her guests coming to her home. Now, they loved it so much it became widely popular all the way up to the present day, which, as you can see, are in many of our cinemas and stuff, such as the movie Shrek.
The only thing you're ever going to be king of is king of the stupids! Hook! Right! Avast! Oh! Time to talk. Lollipop, it's sweet, trip to the candy shop.
Here! And as you can see from Gingy's attire, he has little gumdrops on there, which you can choose has different colors, such as I wrote some really good cookies called the rainbow cookie, which we're going to talk about.
Well, a particular variety of this confection, known primarily by the various regional names, which I'll get into later, is with layers of brightly colored almond-based sponge cake and apricot and or raspberry jam in between each colored layer, as you can see there, and of course cloaked in chocolate. I know, they're delicious, right? Many bakeries sell them by the pound, and because of their many layers, these cookies tend to be somewhat heavy. This variety of the confection likely originated in Italian communities in the United States during the 1900s, in homage to the community heritage. Although often called rainbow cookies, in much of the non-Italian continental United States, some local names for the specific variety are Napoleon cookies, 7-layer cookies, Venetian cookies, 7-layer cake, and tricolor cookies due to their tricolor. Now, on to the fortune cookie. Like chop suey, fortune cookies are an American invention. What a surprise. They originated in California. But who the actual inventor was and which city in California is the true home has been debated for a long time. Unequivocally not Chinese, the fortune cookie may in fact not even be Chinese-American. It's simply American. One history of the fortune cookie claims that David Jung, a Chinese immigrant living in Los Angeles, who was also the founder of the Hong Kong Noodle Company in 1918. Concerned about the poor he saw wandering around his shop, he created the cookie and passed them out free of charge in the streets. What a nice guy he was. Each cookie contained a strip of paper with a inspirational Bible scripture. These scriptures were custom made for Jung by a Presbyterian minister. Another history claims that the fortune cookie was invented in San Francisco by a Japanese immigrant named Makoto Hagaro. Hagaro was a gardener who designed the famous tea garden in Golden Gate Park. An anti-Japanese mayor fired him from his job around the turn of the century, but later the new mayor reinstated him. Grateful to those who had stood by him during his period of hardship, Hagara created a cookie in 1914 that included a thank you note inside. He passed out these cookies in the Japanese tea garden, and they began to become very popular, so he passed them out regularly. In 1915, they were displayed in the Panama Pacific exhibition, which is essentially the San Francisco World's Fair, and the fortune cookie became common in Chinese restaurants in America after World War II. Desserts were not traditionally part of Chinese cuisine, and the cookies thus offered Americans something familiar with an exotic flair after their Chinese meal. They enjoyed that. Although there have been a few cases reported of individuals actually liking the texture and flavor of fortune cookies, most consider the fortune to be the essence of the cookie. Fortune cookies were originally made by hand using chopsticks. Now, I don't know about you guys, but making fortune cookies with chopsticks sounds like a lot of work. In 1964, Edward Louis of San Francisco, Lotus Fortune Cookie Company, automated the process by creating a machine that folds the dough into the cookies and then slips in the fortune. Today, the world's largest fortune cookie manufacturer, Wonton Food Inc. in Long Island, ships out 60 million cookies a month. Now, that's a ton of cookies. Unbelievable. Early fortunes featured biblical sayings or aphorisms from Confucius, Aesop, and even Ben Franklin. Later fortunes included recommended lottery numbers, smiley faces, jokes, and even simple advice. Politicians have used them in campaigns, and fortunes have been customized for weddings and even birthday parties. Today, messages are variously cryptic, non-sensual, and feel good, hectoring, bland, and even mystifying. Now, on to the next cookie with the peanut butter cookie.
All right. So the peanut butter cookie surprisingly has a history as rich as the flavor itself. Now, it's been going on from around the late 1800s to early 1900s. That's been around when peanut butter cookies have been known. George Washington Carver, interesting enough, we all know that he founded many uses for the peanuts, even wrote a book about it. And it was in the 1895s he actually met the Inca Indians who used to press peanuts into peanut butter using hot stones by grinding them down. Now, he isn't credited, however, for the invention or discovery of it, or invention, because he chose not to patent it due to the fact that he saw food as a gift from God and that's something that should not be made money off of. And there are some recipes dating back to 1895 that make use of peanuts in recipes for the cookies. However, it was not peanut butter yet. Now, when it came to the peanut butter making machines, Dr. Kellogg, the same Kellogg of cereal fame, was the first to market it. He used it as a sweet, easy, great way to get protein cheap and efficient in your foods. And Dr. Straub was credited for patenting the actual first machine in 1903, while some debates claim that there was some before in the 1890s. Now, this is just something I thought was interesting. It's actually President Wilson's daughter, and she made a peanut butter cookie recipe here. And actually, yeah, and it has one of the earlier uses of peanut butter is right there. And June 12th happens to be National Peanut Butter Cookie Day. It's an official real thing. And the Mrs. Rohr's new cookbook was actually the first documented event of peanut butters and cookies being put together. And in 1936, there was one recipe which happened to stir up a lot of controversy in the peanut butter cookie world, and that would be those fork marks on top of the dough. It was a Pillsbury cookbook which instructed at the very end to make sure you put fork marks on top of the dough balls without ever fully instructing why. Now, there's been three major theories as to why this is. The first one is believed that it helps the cookie cook more evenly itself. The second is without the shortening, it won't flatten along by itself. And the third would be to notify anybody with any nut allergies. And now, for the next cookie coming up, it's the big leagues, it's the cookie that's a sandwich. We're talking about the Oreo.
The Oreo, the best cookie in the world. So the Oreo was first introduced in 1912 by Nabisco, also known as the National Biscuit Company. It's produced in different places. It's produced in different companies. For example, in Japan, Nabisco is produced through Kraft, which is the cheese company, which I thought that was a little crazy, but yeah. In Argentina, they actually put bananas in their Oreos. Like, it's creative. Like, they put it in the ingredients, which I thought was kind of cool too. It makes me want to try it because I like bananas. And also in Japan, they put green tea in their Oreos, which I thought was kind of funky, but yeah, they do. The origin. It's not really, people aren't really sure where the name Oreo came from. Some believe it came from the French word or, which is gold in French. Some believe it came from the Greek word Oreo, which is mountain in Greek. But nobody really knows why. Some people even believe it was a contest that was held in the early 1900s, and somebody just picked it out, and they were like, oh, okay, we'll go with that, because it sounds cool. 1975 was the first double-stuffed Oreo. 1991 was the Halloween special Oreo, and the latest was in 1995, which is this Christmas special. And now I want to go ahead and introduce one of my favorite little clips from Bruce the Almighty.
What are we really looking at here?
We are going to look at chocolate chip cookies. And like all great inventions, they're by accident. So is the chocolate chip cookie. Ruth Graves Wakefield invented the chocolate chip cookie in Massachusetts. She graduated from the Framingham State Normal School Department of Household Arts, long name, in 1924. And after she graduated as a dietitian. She went around lecturing on food. And then her and her husband bought an old toll house in the early 1930s and turned it into a lodge. A toll house was real popular back in the 1700s, the 1800s, even very early in the 1900s, where travelers would go, they'd stop, change horses, pay their tolls for the roads they were using, and eat a hot meal. So when they turned it into a lodge, she would cook for her guests. And she became locally famous for her desserts. And one of her favorite desserts to make was a cookie called butter drop dew cookies. And the recipe called for baker's chocolate. And if you've ever had or tasted baker's chocolate, it's very, very bitter. Melts very easily. That's why they use it in a lot of baking goods, but it's very bitter. But she didn't have any baker's chocolate, but she had a candy bar, a Nestle candy bar that Andrew Nestle of the Nestle Company had given her. So she improvised. She just broke it up into little pieces and threw it into the batter and mixed it up. And it didn't melt, to her surprise, but she served it anyway, and her guests loved it. So that went on for several years, and she kept gaining more and more local notoriety, and it got to the point where it drew the attention of the Nestle Company. So they wanted to see why their sales in chocolate just skyrocketed. So they tracked it down and traced it back to her. So what they did was they made a whopper of a deal with her. They told her that they would supply her with all the chocolate she needed for the rest of her life if they were allowed to print her recipe on their packages. And they invented the little chocolate chips just because of that. And to this day, they still print the original recipe on the back of the semi-sweet chocolate chips that you buy. And while we're on the subject of chocolate, I thought I would just do a little fun facts on chocolate. This word right here is pronounced chocolate. That's where we get our word for chocolate. It's from the Aztecs, and it means bitter water. I don't know how you get bitter water and good chocolate in the same, but we do. Massachusetts' official state cookie is the chocolate chip. Pennsylvania adopted it as their cookie as well in 2001. In 1984, the original Toll House Inn that Ruth and her husband bought and turned into a lodge burned down. So it's not there, it came toward. Every Russian and American space voyage has included chocolate bars. A lethal dose of chocolate is about 22 pounds or 40 chocolate bars. And I saved the best for last. Chocolate is technically responsible for the microwave. Scientists were experimenting with microwaves in hopes of creating better radar detectors in the wake of World War II. Scientists were testing devices called magnetrons. A scientist named Percy Spencer entered the lab with a chocolate bar in his pocket and realized it quickly began to melt. Spencer then realized that the magnetron could be used potentially to cook food. He successfully tried popping corn and then attempted to cook an egg, which quickly blew up in his face. So I thought the chocolate things were kind of interesting. So we're just going to wrap it up. Leanna's going to finish it off.
We have this wonderful pictures of cookies all around the world because they're amazing. We have learned about every yummy cookie from the early 12th to 19th century. We've took you from shortbread to rainbow and chocolate chip and even the places in between. At Dr. J's Bakery, we include the best variety of biscuits, biscotti, cakes, and more. You now know the story behind these special cookies and how they have endeared not only our hearts, but our taste buds as well. We hope you came hungry because we have the best biscuits in shop. We'll satisfy your every craving and desire. Help yourself to our festive gourmet cookies and desserts. We hope you enjoy.
And
that's how the cookie crumbles.